All right, today joining me is Damon Burton. Damon is an entrepreneur, author, and SEO marketing expert. He's the founder of SEO National, where his high-level client list includes Fortune 500 companies, an MBA team, a Shark Tank featured business, and more. For more than 15 years, he's built a reputation helping his clients organically hit page one of Google search results, and in some cases, outranking much bigger competitors. He's also a proud husband and dad, and he's known for encouraging members of his remote team to prioritize their family life as well. Damon, thanks for coming on.
What's up, Michael? I appreciate the opportunity to hang out.
Yeah, man. Cool. So, I think I'm excited for this conversation because what kind of the impetus of wanting to talk with you is when I think about you, whether it's in business or life, you seem to be a guy who kind of focuses on long-term growth, on kind of building a solid foundation, building from there, even if that's going to take more time, because I think we're in a world of, build fast, break things, shoot up quick growth, and then maybe it fizzles out. So I wanted to know if you think that's kind of accurate of the way you kind of approach life and where that comes from.
Yeah, totally accurate. And it's funny because I was just having a conversation with my COO about this, and it's interesting because I didn't realize it until retrospect. So kind of as you mentioned, I've had my agency for 16 years, and then I was in entrepreneurship kind of loosely a couple of years before that. But I didn't realize that wasn't the norm until probably like 5 years ago. And it's only been magnified since then. So in the last year and a half, 2 years, I've invested heavily into masterminds and really high price ticket, like exclusive groups of other fellow entrepreneurs. And the reason why I specifically say like high price tickets is because I've realized it's a quality filter of the type of people you can surround yourself with. So like the first mastermind that I joined in, it was $50,000 annually. And in that group, there was all these people like you talked about where they just had massive success. So I've increased my exposure to those types of circumstances that you talk about. And it was just fascinating to me because in the first couple, the first month or two in some of these new groups, I'm like, am I in the twilight zone? Because I just couldn't understand it. And now I've come to terms that I'm kind of the odd person out. And it is interesting because it is instant gratification. And more power to the people. I'm not saying that they're wrong and I'm right. It's just a different mindset. And so what happens is there's people that have dozens of times over had more success than I have. And when I say success, some people always call me out fairly enough that what I mean by that is like when we talk about entrepreneurship, usually we're talking about financial incentives. So when I say more success than I am, I'm talking about like income. But they don't keep it, right? So they may get it faster, but they don't sustain it. And so it's to kind of wrap this up, my perspective on it is I want peace of mind. I want stability. I want freedom. And when you go the other route, you can get the wins. And if that's your thing, like, some of us are wired differently. Some of us want the constant churn and change of things. And if that's your thing, then that's fine. I don't. Like, I want to wake up. I want peace of mind. I want to know that I have total freedom to go, you know what, today I'm just going to hang out with my kids and everything's still fine. And really what I boiled it down to is there's a difference between a business and a constant promotion. And a lot of these other people have a constant promotion. So there's not a right, there's not a wrong. I think there's just advantages and disadvantages to both the scenarios. So I could go on and on and on and on, but I'll kind of leave it there.
No, yeah, that's cool. I think I'm interested in what you said about between a business and a promotion. By that, do you mean that if you have that sort of promotion approach to things, that you always have to be running things and doing new things to bring people in, versus business is more, self-fulfilling and kind of brings people in?
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, I have a lot of friends that have found success doing multiple businesses and multiple ventures. And anytime I haven't asked, and I haven't made this comment in a couple of years, but over the years, I'd make a comment to them where I'd say, so for 16 years, I've just stayed in my lane of SEO. That's it. And every year it consistently grows. We do multiple millions a year and we haven't spent a dollar on advertising. We don't even have a form of lead gen. I don't have a sales team, and it continues to grow. And I'll explain the difference as to why here in a minute. But then on the other side of the equation, you have people that are in constant promotion. And so it's like they have a thing, they sell the thing, and then it's like, well, what's next? And so they either have to come up with a new thing, like it's cash infusions, right? It's not recurring revenue. There's no consistency to it. And so it's like, well, what's my next thing? Or how can I repackage the same thing to put a new spin on it? And that's fine. But at some point you get tired, or at some point you realize I don't have a business. So there's these entrepreneurs that have had great success, but then usually what happens is they go, well, what if I want to spend time with my family? What if I want to take some downtime? And they can't, because the promotion is them, like they are the business. And so if they step out, the business steps out. So when you actually have a business, then the growth becomes dependent on the processes instead of the promotion. So I mean, but you get the idea, right? So it's basically like, do you have a sustainable model where people know what you offer? Like when people come to me, having been at this for 16 years, I am no longer an SEO consideration or an option. When people come to me, it's because I am the SEO guy. There's a difference in the distinguishment of your reputation. And so like you could think about, like right now there's a big rush on AI, justifiably so. Before that was, crypto and NFTs, and before that was whatever. But like if you start to pay attention to a lot of the people that constantly promote whatever the new thing is, they're not, and that's not to say that's bad, but they're not known for a thing. And so that's the difference in how the reputation gets built, is the consistency in what you're offering. Like, do they know what you offer, or are you the constant hype guy? Right.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, someone, if they think of Damon Burton, they think SEO right away. Like, whereas somebody else, it's kind of all over the map. It's like, I guess they're skilled in marketing and business, but if I have a specific problem, maybe they're not the person I think about right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. Yeah, something I was thinking about is with you in particular, just kind of getting ready for talking with you, is, SEO kind of seems like it lends itself to that philosophy, right? Because it is kind of a more long-term game sometimes, depending on
Mm-hmm.
what kind of strategy you're going after. So I was wondering if you kind of got into SEO and then SEO sort of shaped your philosophy, or do you think you were attracted to it because that's the type of person you are?
I think the latter. Yeah. So I've always been okay with delayed gratification, and I didn't realize how much of a superpower that was until years later. Like a lot of things in entrepreneurship have been really interesting in my journey, because the majority of them is just the way I was, but I didn't understand the value in those things until I had already created the foundation. So for example, like never crossed my mind the value of recurring revenue. I was just starting an SEO agency. And then now, as I've found reasonable success and I talk to other entrepreneurs, like you live and die by recurring revenue. Like it's what it's what gives you the gift of predictability, right? I had no idea. It was never even crossed my mind until probably like year 8, how unique of a position I was in to have consistent revenue and not worry about like shit, like, do I need to do a promotion next month? And so things like that, the majority of things in my life I've been very intentional and strategic about, but there's a couple little things like that that I can't fully take credit for. It's just the way I was for one reason or another. Now, what's interesting about your question about SEO is it's definitely the latter. SEO didn't shape me, but I later became attracted to it. But I also didn't realize that until retrospect, and probably a couple years ago, I asked myself one day, I was just kind of going down a rabbit hole in my head, and I ended up getting to a question of, why am I still doing this? Like, why am I still doing SEO? At the time, I was probably 12, 13 years into it. And I said, do I really like this? And so I started to like challenge myself and go, am I doing this just because I have financial freedom and I've established, comfort? Or do I really have a passion behind this still? I got nervous for a minute, because I was like, well, shit, depending on what the answer is, am I gonna all of a sudden not enjoy my career? But fortunately, I realize I do still appreciate it, and I can tell you very specifically why. For me, SEO is consistent enough that I know what I'm walking into day to day, but it's also evolving frequently enough that it keeps it attractive and interesting. So yeah, the long term game. I think it's underappreciated by a lot of entrepreneurs, and there's a lot of value and stability if you learn to look at things as from that perspective that it's not you're turning down short term money, but by not having delayed gratification, you're turning down long term stability.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's funny because kind of when I started learning about internet marketing, started coming into it, everyone's like, SEO is dead, SEO is so last decade, and all this kind of stuff. And I kind of bought into it. I was like, okay, I guess there's this thing called Facebook ads, and started learning about it. And it wasn't until I started making my own websites and started to see, just a little bit of results with them using SEO. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Everybody that was saying that was promoting something, like
Yeah.
they were trying to say, don't look at this, do this. I'm going to teach
Yep.
you how to do this. But it's not because SEO went away. It's just because that's they wanted to create a shiny object thing, right?
Exactly.
Um, cool. So part of that, sort of, it sounds like you have like the consistency of liking to do, similar things every day, and yet you have that variety coming in. On the flip side of business, moving more into the personal, you said you kind of have that freedom to walk away from the desk for a day if you just want to hang out with the family or do whatever. So how do you kind of look at growing the business, having the family life, and sort of that balance? And I think a big reason I'm asking here is because I think sometimes when you want to grow the business, you wonder, like, could I be doing more? Could I be doing whatever it takes to get to the next level, versus that sort of calm, consistent approach where you say,
Mhm.
okay, if I don't get the sale, it's not a big deal because I'm more interested in that exponential long-term stuff.
So for me, on the last comment about if I don't get that deal, for me, it's not a sacrifice of the long-term exponential. For me, I immediately go to, is that worth the sacrifice of the long-term family time? It's never a business decision for me. So I always prioritize my decisions based on the potential impact of my family. And so for some people, like, we're all wired differently. I am an entrepreneur at heart. It is my hobby. It is what I obsess about. It is the concept of business as a game is my entertainment, right? I'm in a 24/7 competition against myself. So I don't look at a lot of other competitors. I don't really care what they're doing. I always want to be a better version of me. And so that's really hard to tell yourself, I need to take a time out from myself, right? Because it's easier when the competition is external to turn it off temporarily. But you can't turn off your head. So I am perpetually in my head. But I've been fortunate enough that what in both personal life and in business to be exposed to people doing things terribly wrong. And so I'm the oldest of seven, grew up lower middle class, alcoholic stepdad. And so growing up in that environment, this is another one of those moments where it's like, I can't claim, um, I can't claim this choice where I look at things from this view. It was just fortunately I was able to look at things where instead of playing the victim, I've never played the victim, and I couldn't tell you why. And so I've been lucky to look at things and go, don't do things that way. And so from an early age, probably preteens, early teens, it's like, okay, well, when I get older, um, I do want financial stability, so my kids are not in the circumstance that I'm in. And so I was fortunate to have the forethought to compare my current situations at the time to future opportunities and scenarios. And I did the same in business. The last two guys that I worked for before I started my agency, one gentleman was super successful. He probably did $1 to $2 million a month, and I was his only full-time employee. He had a part-time secretary, and it was just super toxic. Over time, he added more people, and everybody was just miserable in there. He openly like cheated on his wife at our Christmas party. Him and his bunch of friends were doing cocaine on the table in his room, and it was like, okay, this is not where I want to surround myself. And so I got out of that. I had started to build a reputation where when I exited, another gentleman heard that was in the same industry. That guy was the total opposite. He was very family first. He would be in a meeting and his wife would call and he would just stop everything. Right. And so that was admirable. But what happened with that guy is I learned to not be greedy, because his business he had before the one that I was working for, he had this huge civil suit, and he never had any criminal lawsuit until a couple of years later, and it caught up to him. So his civil suit was millions of dollars. This criminal suit caught up, and he, at the age of 32, he got sentenced to 29 and a half years in federal prison. So that was, I never had really, I was never very greedy, to begin with, but of course money is attractive. And so at some points you start to wonder, like, how far would you be willing to push the boundaries to chase the extra dollar? And that very quickly was a reality check to go, no, I have the right intentions. Don't worry about, going down that path. And so I always looked at those, like I never had a mentor. I never had somebody where I learned things from, but instead I learned really well how not to do things and how to not look at things from other people's mistakes. So that's where I got a lot of that mindset from, was like, okay, from my personal childhood, do things this way to protect my family. From the business perspective, do things this way to protect my sanity and my freedom. So just been fortunate to look at life from that proactive defensive lens, seeing what other people did.
Yeah. I think from that, I think sometimes it's easier for people to learn from their own mistakes, just because the pain is what kind of forces you to finally take a look at yourself and say, okay, what needs to change here?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it was just the proximity, that you were so close to these things that you were able to learn from other people's mistakes?
I don't. I really think it was my childhood. I think that hit home hard enough that that's really what planted the seed that for me would last the lifetime of, like, how do I get ahead of providing for my family that doesn't exist yet? Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
I would say it was definitely my childhood.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it seems like there's that famous story of, like, the two brothers, and they both had the dad, and one ends up successful, the other one ends up not. And when they ask, like, what do you attribute your life to, of like where you ended up, they say, like, oh, with a parent like mine, how could my life have turned out any differently?
Yeah.
So what do you think what was that made you kind of go the opposite direction? Was it something about yourself? It was, I don't know.
It's the wild card. That's the ultimate thing that I can't really claim. I've been very intentional about everything in my life, but having that perspective, I couldn't say why I did. I think it was just the luck of the draw, because that story you just kind of touched on, I give that story all the time, because I am the odd person out even within my family, right? There's I don't want to say justifiable opportunities to play the victim card, but there's been a lot of unfortunate circumstances, in my family. And so I don't want to say it's okay to play the victim card, but I can see why people got stuck down that path. I don't know. I couldn't tell you why, but I'm glad.
Yeah, cool. Something that was interesting, as you were talking, was you said, the business side of things is your hobby, but it's also your obsession. How do you like?
Oh, yeah. I'm glad you revisited that, because I was going to elaborate on that. So I make sure to prioritize my family first, and I try to do it in a way that's structured. Like the processes and structure, like everybody's heard it, but it really is such a superpower. But you also have to figure out how to not be robotic about it. Like the idea of scheduling family time works, but it also sounds cringy. And so I don't want people to misinterpret that it's like, no, I only hang out with my family within these hours. It's not like that. It's actually, that's the minimum amount of time that I guarantee. And then there's above and beyond that, that I often hang out with them more. So like at a very minimum, like I always want to be able to have this window for my family. So like an example is I block off my calendar between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. because that's when, well, actually it's just blocked off period up until about 9 a.m. But I wake up early, not because I enjoy it, but I like getting a head start on the world. And I also went back and forth because I think my internal clock um, is more set towards night time, but I've just groomed myself to wake up earlier. And the reason why is because I never know how late my kids will necessarily want to hang out. There's always opportunities that I can spend time with them at night, but they will never be up at 5 o'clock. And so I use that window to get in extra time. And so then basically from 5 to 7-ish, I'm getting a head start on the day. I'm working out, doing whatever. And then by 7:30, my kids start waking up. So from 7 to 9 is family time. And then I keep that flexible. And so my calendar, I set in rules where you can't get on my calendar in that time, because if it's a nice day, I want to walk them to school, even, it's snowing today. Well, they're out of school this week, but in the winter, if it's snowing and we're driving to school, it doesn't matter. Like I can make a breakfast or whatever. Like it doesn't, I have the freedom to do whatever with that time involving them. But then towards the end of the business day, I also block off from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. Same reason. That's about the time they're coming home. If I want to walk to school, I can, or if I want to drive to school, or if my wife gets them, whatever the case may be, it doesn't matter. I can say hi to them when they come home. So that's always blocked off. I go a step further in my availability. Like if you go search, if you go look at my social media posts, I always talk about all the filters I put up. And so I have a whole page in our contracts that says, here are the reasons not to hire us. And in that page, it says, you don't get my cell phone number. We're not available after hours. You can't call us after 5. The auto attendant shuts off on the weekends. We're not around on holidays. So we proactively set like all these things. And at the very beginning of this conversation, you talked about how I encourage that for my team too. I don't expect any of my team members to be available on the weekends. I encourage them not to check their email after hours or on the weekends. I don't bug them on their cell phone. I try to only reach out to them during business hours. So I prioritize availability to my family first. And then there's still plenty of time in the day after that. And then reality, like the chances of something being such an urgent fire that you have to be available 24/7, it's pretty unlikely. So usually the people that demand that are the clients that you want to avoid in general.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said saying no to a potential client or losing a sale, whatever it may be. You actually look at that as a positive thing, right? Like it could be, I mean, unless they're a great fit and just something went wrong, right? But you're saying like you're looking for the right fit because that's going to allow you to grow in the long term. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So it's like, okay, are you willing to change? Are you willing to exchange tomorrow's potential for today's dollar? And for me, it's always a no. So of course I want more business. Of course I want new clients, but hopefully everybody that's listening finds enough success that they don't have to say yes to everybody. Because when you start to have that freedom to say no, you start to realize how much of a superpower it is. Because every time you hesitate but say yes, I guarantee you every single one of those clients that you hesitated but said yes to bit you in the ass later. And so I've learned that it's just a safety mechanism. So I have zero hesitation about saying no. And I actually do feel a large sense of relief every time I say no, because I know that I just protected myself and my team down the road.
That's great. Just want to kind of shift gears here for a second and go back to what you were mentioning in the beginning. You mentioned recently you've kind of been going bigger on the networking side of things. Is that because it wasn't a big part of what you were doing early on, and why are you making a harder push now for some of those higher ticket memberships?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I really avoided, I enjoyed networking, but I avoided networking events because like years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I'd go to a couple like local networking local networking events, and you don't know what you don't know. So I didn't know what other opportunities there were, but out of all the ones I was aware of when I would go spend my time there, I just didn't feel like it was the best use of time. Lots of nice people, but I just felt like I was playing at a different level or had the intentions of being and existing at a different level. And so for years, I just avoided them entirely. And then about 2 years ago, I joined Russell Brunson's Inner Circle, and that was a $50,000 price tag. And that's a good example of one of those where I realized very quickly the value of that price tag being a quality filter. Because if you think about who's willing to pay $50,000, first of all, they have to have established a certain level of success to be able to afford it. Second of all, they have to have a certain type of mindset to be willing to invest that amount of money on themselves. And so when I got in, I was like, oh, that's the gap that I was missing between the local networking events and things like this, because these people are the ones that are playing at a different level too, and they want to go even further. And so I largely avoided it because I just didn't know, where the right room to be in was. And then once I got into that, then you start to see, you start to be able to quantify making your money back. Like the first year, I probably turned that 50,000 into 500,000. And I didn't even implement 90% of the stuff I learned. Like I got books off to the side of me of my notepads from going to all the events. I'm just barely now starting to roll things out. And the reason why I didn't roll things out earlier is because part of what we talked about earlier is I have a good thing going and I didn't want to get distracted and burn it down chasing another shiny object of a dollar. And so I've been putting in safety nets to maintain quality control at scale. And now I'm starting to implement a lot of these things and grow. And so then, having been through that experience, the way that I look at masterminds and high ticket events now is you are buying access to proximity of people that you want to surround yourself, or you are buying accelerated learning and growth. And so now when I look at these different opportunities, I have all sorts of masterminds I could be in, but now I understand it's like an investment. Like if I put the 50,000 into this mastermind, I don't just blindly join them. It's like, what specifically can I get out of that? So then another one I joined was 30,000. And the value in this other one is a lot of what we talked about integrity. And so it's like, so the first one is about how to scale in business and purely financial for the most part. The second one is more about finding your place in the world and maintaining that balance and growing with integrity. And then this third mastermind that I just joined serves a different purpose. The main thing their main curriculum is mergers and acquisitions. Like how do you scale your business by acquiring other businesses? And they also have a nice balance of aggressive business tactics, but also a nice balance with morals and integrity. And so there's just different things that you can get from each one. But what I would base your decision on is like, what's missing in what you want to accomplish, and can you accelerate access to those people or that curriculum by buying into one of those groups?
Cool. So it sounds like kind of early on, maybe your connotation, your association with networking was like maybe not a high leverage, high value activity, but when you kind of shifted your mindset or shifted where you were directing that sort of networking energy, it kind of changed for you.
Yeah, it's totally where it was directed. Yeah.
Cool. So just to, I know it's kind of like the elephant in the room for me. Not, I mean, I think it's just naturally become a question recently on if we shift over to the SEO side of things. So obviously AI, ChatGPT, Lambda, all those new things coming out. I'm thinking about what is the future of SEO and how that looks. How do you see things emerging as AI kind of is coming online here?
So I don't think it's going to change dramatically for probably 3 to 5 years. And I can give specific reasons why. So my first hesitation in adopting, like, AI is amazing. I get it. I understand the romanticism around it. My first hesitations on fully adopting it is from a quality control perspective. And so we use it for ideation and coming up, like, we're content heavy. Every sort of like AI is not new. There's been half a dozen different versions prior to ChatGPT. ChatGPT is the most advanced, but the problem with a lot of these, purely from a content output perspective, is that A, you don't know where it aggregated its content from, and so B, you don't know the accuracy of it, and so that creates a liability. Now, there's all these other potential issues with liability too. So it was rumors, but now in the last 10 days, it's become fact that there's potential legislation against AI. There was a senator just a couple days ago that it was funny because I was recording a video for my team about this kind of question, and I was talking about the rumors of potential legislation, and then it came out that they're wanting to do a 6-month moratorium and just shut it down, so they can go, okay, how do we get our checks and balances in place? And ever since then, in the last couple days following that, now I want to say it was Italy. I could be wrong. That came out and just
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
yeah, just outright banned it, ChatGPT. And then there's other countries in Europe that are implementing moratoriums on it. So I mean, could you imagine how bad of a position you would be in if you fully adopted it and your entire business model now depends on it? So I'm not saying don't use it. I'm just saying, don't hedge everything, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So there'll be, I think what'll happen is Google will look at, so one of the other rumors is that the output of the content it's obviously algorithmic based, but is there a pattern in the output? And so there's rumors that there's a footprint that can be detected on the output. So I think what's going to happen is at some point Google will come out with what's called a rel. Rels already exist, and if you're not familiar with what it is, you can put a rel stands for relationship. It's a little code behind the scenes on a web page that says that gives search engines more context about the content. So for example, there's rel equals no follow. So if you're talking about a piece of content that you want to share with your audience, but you don't want Google to care about it, you can put rel equals no follow, and that says, hey, Google, this page exists, just kind of ignore it. And then there's also rel equals UGC, which stands for user generated content. So that says, hey, Google, I didn't come up with all this. I just kind of aggregated it. So, rate it accordingly. I'm willing to bet what's going to happen is they're going to come out with something like a rel equals AI. And then you got two options at that point. One is play by the rules. And then you go, yeah, I got this from ChatGPT, rel equals AI. And then Google will probably go, cool, it's not your content, so we're not going to value it very, very highly. Or you don't play by the rules. And then if there is a pattern, then Google's going to go, great, you didn't acknowledge it, so we're going to ding you anyway. So I think that like in life in general, the value is in soft skills. Like out of all the evolutions in technology over the years, the things that haven't been replaced are soft skills. And I think it's the same thing in content output. Your ability to create a story through soft skills is going to be really hard to be replaced. So yes, use it. Yes, there's a lot of opportunity. I don't think it's doomsday. I think you just have to be particular about how you implement it.
What about search itself? Like, how do you see the behavior of people changing in the way that they get their questions answered?
Yeah, the people that do SEO for question-based like content sites, they're going to have a harder time sooner. The majority of our clients are B2B or commerce, and so you can't buy a thing from ChatGPT. I think what's going to happen is it's less of, I think this is a bigger UX, a user experience thing than chat replacing search. And here's why. Google cannot, it would destroy their revenue model. If they went to just a chat-based output, where do the 10 blue links go, which is like 70% of Google's income? I'm willing to bet, and several other people that I've had this conversation with agree, that Google's had this technology for a while. They just couldn't release it until they were forced to release it. Like there's no way that they were able to come out with, what was their AI version, Bard? Like they came out with that like 5 days after ChatGPT just took over market share and started gaining momentum. They did not create that in a couple days. So I think it's what's going to happen is they're probably going to have to marry the existing user experience of 10 links or however many links they end up doing And then like if you go look at a desktop search on Google, you have your traditional links on the left, and then on the right panel, you might have what's called like knowledge base or knowledge graph. Maybe that right column becomes the chat output. But from a business model, it's going to be really hard for Google to replace the entirety of their framework of how they exist. So I don't think search engines are going away anytime soon. It's just going to be user experience change.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. It seems like they're already doing it to a certain extent where they kind of can give you a summary, or sometimes if your question is super simple, they'll give you the answer right at the top where you don't have to click on it. Something I noticed in both talking about like content and about scaling your business, you mentioned quality control. So how do you approach that? Like on the more the business operations side. So like making sure that as you grow, because you're not a solopreneur, right? You've got a team. So how do you make sure that you kind of try to keep an eye on quality while also looking to grow the business?
So I document absolutely everything. And when I first documented processes, it was probably 8 or 9 years ago. And the way I approached it was I wanted to do it so efficiently that I didn't have to revisit it. Documenting processes sucks, but it's worth it. Like it probably took me an hour or two every other day for a year, because in my mind, it's like, how do I do this efficiently enough that I don't have to, like, let's say I finished documenting it, then I knew I cut corners. Well, then I got to go back and reread everything and go, where did I cut corners? And I didn't want to do that. So I sat down, and the way that I looked at how I documented it was talent is going to be like water. It's going to try and find the path of least resistance. They're not going to screw up on purpose. They're going to screw up because they didn't know the difference. And so how do I plug every single one of those holes proactively? And so the first round of documenting processes was the very black and white literal stuff, like step 1, step 2, step 3. And then what I did after I documented that, I went back and I said, okay, well, how do I get myself out of this more and make the team even more dependent on the processes? And then what I started to document is the dynamic stuff. Okay, well, if I can't tell them what the answer to something is, but I also don't want to have to be their crutch that they always have to ask to find the answer, how do I document my thought process to then find the answer? So I just got super granular with everything, and now it's become a cultural thing within the company where they understand that, and so it's nice now that the team can go, okay, how do I document that? And so I've been able to communicate that, like, hey, if you were to ever redelegate this to somebody else so that you don't have to babysit them every time or be the answer for them every time, can you document it in a way that if they never had any experience doing this before, that they can follow the outline and do it perfectly? So I try to document everything in a way where as long as I hire somebody that can read and follow directions, they can't screw it up. Does it take longer? Absolutely. But just like we've talked on a couple of these bullet points, like the delayed gratification, yes, spend the extra little time now so that the compounding interest on that investment in time saves you exponentially more time over the long run.
Yeah, cool. That makes a lot of sense. So if you were giving advice to someone who, they're looking to, find success, but also kind of keep that balance, kind of prioritize the right things in life, what would you say to them?
I heard an interesting quote actually just last week at one of the mastermind events, and it was in Russell Brunson's inner circle, and it was one of the members. They were talking about a conversation that they had with Russell, and I'm probably going to slaughter this, but he said, instead of looking at things as, I wear an entrepreneur hat and then you take it off, and then I wear the dad hat, instead you have to decide which one you prioritize. And instead of switching hats, if you're a family man first, then your one and only hat is the dad hat. But what your perspective then has to shift to is not that I'm an entrepreneur and a dad, it's that you are a dad that has the ability to also find financial success. So you're still a dad, and everything always get, family man, husband, whatever, wife, whatever it may be. And so instead of having to choose one or the other, it's always what your true priority is. Like, we all know which one we want to prioritize first, but we all play a game with ourselves where it's like, no, I need to do this extra hour here, or I need to work on the weekend there. If you fast forward a year later, that extra baseball game you missed, whatever you stayed up working on late on, you probably aren't going to remember. But I would never forgive myself for missing one of my kids' things. So to this day, I have never missed anything. So I think that was an interesting way of looking at it, is like, you are the family person first, just with a special ability to also do lots of other cool things. But at your core, you need to choose which one you are first.
Cool. I imagine like some people listening to that, and like I've run up against this too, is like, some people they're just getting started, or they're making the transition maybe from a career to entrepreneurship or whatever it might be. And there's a chapter of their life where it seems like, they may hear that and be like, yeah, but how can I do that when I'm just getting off the ground, or when I'm trying to prioritize this or whatever? What would you say to them when they're struggling with keeping that dad hat on as the core identity, versus like, I need to push in this time to make this work so that I can be more present as the dad, or as the son, as the whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I can appreciate that. We're all going to be in different seasons, and I think that's the key, is understanding other seasons, and don't guilt trip yourself into thinking you have to perpetually be grinding 24/7. So like, if you're pre-kids, like, let's say, so for me, where I did the excessive grind was when I was first married, and it was before we had kids. And so what I had to walk through with myself in that moment was, I need to make the sacrifice now, so it's less uncomfortable having to make that sacrifice later when I have kids. So I was fortunate in that circumstance, and I realized not everybody might be. So if you already have kids, the first thing that I would look at is, where's that window that you can sacrifice that's only your time and not the kids' time. So the example I gave earlier is, my kids will never be up at 5. I don't want to get up at 5. I'm not a morning person, but I'm still hungry. And so that's when I get in my grind, as at 5. So I would look at where you can make your sacrifice, not your kids' sacrifice, not your family's sacrifice. Find that window, maybe an hour, maybe 30 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, but that compounds over time. So that's the first thing I'd look at is there any window that your kids would know no different? They wouldn't go, well, why is dad, why is mom like putting me second? See if there's any of those opportunities. Now, if the schedule just doesn't work out and you have to make a sacrifice during family time, communicate with your family and have an open conversation. And that will go a long way. If you sit down with your spouse, if you sit down with your kids and be like, hey, look, here's my dreams. I want to accomplish these things. And the reason why I want to accomplish these things is because I do want to spend more time with you. And I want to take you places, and I want to do these cool things. Is it okay with you if for the next however many days, however many weeks, maybe a couple months, if once a week or whatever fits your schedule, right? I don't know everybody's scenario, and I'm not in everybody's shoes, but have an honest conversation with yourself first and go, how can I properly articulate this to my family that honestly addresses my goals, while honestly communicating the potential advantages and disadvantages, and honestly communicates the sacrifices that I'm willing to entertain, so I can ask them if they're willing to entertain it too. I'd leave it there. I don't know. Communication will go a long way. A lot of us are going to be in a hard spot. I'm not downplaying that whatsoever. I think you just need to be honest with yourself and your family, like what the potential advantages of being willing to tackle that head on are.
Cool. Yeah, maybe sharing the vision of what we want life to look like, and what may be necessary to get there. Sounds like.
Yeah, just get the buy-in, because the worst thing you can do is not communicate. And I can't tell you how to do it right, but I can tell you how to do it wrong, and that's going to be not communicating.
Yeah, cool. Awesome, man. This has been great. Anything else you want to share about life, work, SEO, anything like that, anything comes to mind on today, April 4th, 2023, anything that you'd like people to know?
Just be honest with yourself. Business is hard, but if you know what your vision is and you can get your family and friends, your team on board, it's worth it.
Awesome, brother. Thanks for coming on. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Michael.
Yeah, for sure. Talk to you later.